What's up, everyone? Welcome to Wednesday nights. Welcome to Mythic Conversations. Thank you all for joining, whether you're tuning in live, whether you're catching this on replay, whether you tune in every single week, or whether this is your first time. Welcome to Mythic Conversations, the weekly Mythic Conversations or Mythic Legions and Four Horsemen Studios show. That Four Horsemen Studios show, that's going to be very relevant tonight, considering the topic of conversation. I'm your host, Jeremy Gerard. I'm a Mythic Legions collector and customizer. You can see some of my collection behind me. I also have the distinct privilege of being the digital marketing manager and webmaster for Four Horsemen Studios. That means that everything that you see at sourcehorseman.com is content I help bring you. If you want to see more of my customs and my work, you can follow me on Instagram. That's at Mythic Customs. You can also check out my website. That is www.mythiccustoms.com. Post all photos of my customs there, along with recipes, so you can follow along at home. And of course, I'm here every Wednesday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time for this show, Mythic Conversation. So thank you, everyone. Again, got a number of people tuning in live. Wow, the comments are coming in fast tonight. Jennifer, Chris, what's up? Anthony, as always, thank you very much. Leland, Retrospect Customs, Drew, Super Turtle, wow, Strumming Nerd, Dave, Greg, Sean, thank you all very much for joining. So tonight's topic is going to be an interesting one. It's going to be a little bit of a history lesson, or a Horstery lesson, if you want. We all know Mythic Legions. It's what brings us here every single week to talk about this amazing toy line. But the reality is that the Four Horsemen have put out a number of toys long before Mythic Legions were ever available. I mean, we all know them from things like Masters of the Universe Classics through, Mattel and then Super 7, a number of the other things that they've done, Thundercats and so forth. But the reality is that they've also, outside of those licensed properties, they've also done an absolute ton of their own in-house properties over the year, a ton of figures. So I thought it would be really interesting to look at some of those figures tonight, talk a little bit about the history of those figures, and really about what led, how those figures, in my opinion, led us to where we are today with Mythic Legions. Very, very cool. So before we get started, like we do every single week, we are going to talk a little Mythic Legions news. And just like last week, if you tuned in and checked out my conversation with Zombie 13, which, by the way, thank you all for tuning in on that. I got some wonderful feedback. That format of bringing on guests and having an actual conversation, that has clearly been something that you all enjoy. I am a little hurt that you don't just like to hear me babble for 90 minutes, but I get it. You want to hear some other perspectives as well. I'm kidding, of course. I want to hear other perspectives too. I'm intending to do a lot more interview shows coming up. So you're going to see a lot more interviews like the one I did with Zombie last week and the one I did with Steven a few weeks before that. So looking forward to that. But last week, a big part of the conversation was obviously around AllStars 3. Talking about that, the voting for that began on Friday. Thank you to everyone who has voted so far. We have literally gotten thousands of votes in already. There are some clear front runners in this race. Now, I can't tell you who they are. I can tell you a lot of people have been asking, when is the announcement going to be made? That hasn't been decided yet, but I can tell you, you won't have to wait too long. We are trying to turn this around pretty quickly so everyone can know who their 2021 class of Mythic Legions All-Stars are going to be. AllStars 4 is, of course, what I'm talking about. But yeah, the voting's going really, really well. It's, there's definitely been some people that haven't been able to get the email. It's a small, small number. Most people have gotten the email. Some of the things that I've told people, I'll reiterate here. And thank you to everyone, by the way, who has helped spread the word on this. If you don't get the email, the first thing you want to do is check your spam folder. A lot of people have said, oh, I always get emails from the Horseman. I don't know why I wouldn't get these. They come from two different places. The emails from the Horseman come from actually the old store 3D cart, and we're going to be changing that. They also occasionally send emails through their Kickstarter list. These are coming from SurveyMonkey. So SurveyMonkey is an online platform to, big surprise, run surveys, and it allows us to kind of lock down the vote and make it so people can't scam the system and vote many, many times to inflate a character that they may want to see. We really want this to be a legitimate fan vote. We want who the fans want to win to actually be the winners. We use this exact process for AllStars 3 with a lot of success, so we're repeating it for AllStars 4. So what we did was we used the list, the customer list, basically, as well as the newsletter list from the new Store Horseman. So if you remember last year, we moved Store Horseman from the old 3D cart site to the new Shopify system. This was done specifically to harden it, to make things like those in-stock sales go a bit smoother. Because that's a new list, that's a fresh list of user accounts, we decided to use that as our list. Plus, we had just done the Alithia sale, and we figured most people probably ordered an Alithia, so they're probably already in there. We have had a number of subscribers since we sent out the first blast last Friday, so I sent another blast out actually yesterday. The people that have said, I don't have it, when I tell them, check your spam folder, honestly, 75% of them find it there. The remaining, percentage, yes, there are some people that aren't getting them. I'm honestly seeing people that use Hotmail have a really big problem. There's not a lot of people using it because Hotmail is kind of an antiquated email system these days. Most people have moved over to like Gmail or something if they just want free mail. But I definitely have seen some challenges with Hotmail. I've said, we'll try to send it out. A lot of times when people contact me directly, I will manually check to see if their emails have been sent to. If they have, there's really not much I can do. In some cases, it's actually a person's email account, their email client, like Hotmail per se, that's blocking the email. So we're doing everything we can to make sure everyone gets a vote. Like I said, the vast majority of you have already cast your votes, and we thank you for that. Voting ends this Friday. So this Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern time, I'm locking down the votes. Ballots will be counted. And soon thereafter, I'm not saying it's Friday. I don't know when it's going to be, but hopefully soon thereafter, we'll be able to announce who your Mythic Legions All-Stars 4 are. So very, very cool. I will tell you, I can't tell you the votes, but looking at the votes, there are some characters that are really, really high that are exactly what I expected. There's other characters that are really, really high that are very, very surprising to me. And for everyone who looked at that list and said, why would they put Faustia in the list? Why would they put Fury Clan Orc? I got to tell you, those characters, they've gotten a fair number of votes, a lot more votes than you'd probably expect. So it just goes to show how this line is consistently growing, how this line is consistently bringing new fans in who want some of these figures. I know a lot of people are like, oh, Fury Orc is available at Big Bad Toy Store. Yeah, there's something to be said that $35 as part of AllStars 4 versus $50 at Big Bad Toy Store. That's very appealing to some people. We'll see who the winners actually are when all said and counted, but it was really, really interesting to see every character getting at least some votes, and some of these heavy hitters, some of the characters that are getting really high votes that are in the running are characters I didn't necessarily expect to be there. So always very interesting to see what the fans want. And we can definitely see them voting in force for this one. Let's see. So Diego's telling me that he actually got his vote at Hotmail. Yeah, I mean, we sent out thousands of these. So undoubtedly, some of the people voting are from Hotmail. One of the things that happens actually that some people don't realize is when you get mail, sometimes you get it from, a provider like Constant Contact or SurveyMonkey that we're using here. And there will be times where people are like, this is junk mail, not from the Horseman, but just in general. And they'll click a button that will make it so they not only unsubscribe from that mailing list, but there are ways that you can unsubscribe from like all SurveyMonkeys. So you're basically saying no one that I care about is ever going to send me a SurveyMonkey survey. I don't want to ever get them. I know there are people that do this without even realizing they're doing it. And then they're like, well, I can't get the email. Why isn't it coming through? Sometimes it's things that you may have done. Sometimes it's your email system flagging a legitimate email as possible junk or spam. There's honestly many, many reasons why it could happen. All I can say is we're doing everything we can to make sure that we get you those emails. Super Turtle saying, I just discovered the Blood Armor figure. He looks amazing. Hope to get him someday if he ever shows up in these votes. He was actually in AllStars 2, so he's already made the vote. They've never said that if a character is an All-Star, they'll never come back again. They've never actually said that. But thus far, any character that has been an All-Star, they haven't put that character back up for another vote. So it's a little tough. He's actually a pretty heavily produced figure because he was really popular in the first wave. The Blood Armor Vorgus Vermilius was the fan voted figure, so different vote than All-Stars. He's the one that fans basically created during the initial Kickstarter for Mythic Legions 1.0. So he was really popular then. He obviously got an all-star release, so he was popular, enough, and there was a whole second run. There's quite a few of them out there, but they are still very, very desirable, which is actually interesting because I see a lot of people talking about all-stars and saying like, oh, the minute a character is named an all-star, the value of the old one plummets. Well, and that is true, of course. If a character makes the all-star wave, people aren't going to be paying $200-$300 for them because they're going to be getting them for $35. However, I would suggest that the Barbarian Builder, which is a $200 figure, pretty much anywhere you look, he was an all-star. Sir Gideon, Sapular, Orn Steelhide, Asterion the Minotaur. Now, granted, these are all-star 1 figures, but those were all all-stars. Atlas the Conqueror, Attila Leosair, they were all Vorgus Vermilius, Carpathius, they were all all-stars. So just because a character is an all-star, while it's going to definitely have a short-term effect on the prices, the reality is, as I keep saying, more and more fans coming into the line, more and more fans see these awesome figures, and they're like, oh my goodness, I really want Asterion. I really want Atlas. It makes those figures go back up in price. Let's see what else we got here. Retrospect saying we need an orc. Gorthok is that guy. Nick saying I'm both scared and excited for the results. Well, I understand excited. Scared, I'm not sure why. I mean, the one reason I understand some people might be anxious for them is All-Stars, it doesn't happen, once a year, if that. They've never said that it's a yearly thing. They did All-Stars 3 last year, All-Stars 4 this year. So, they're trying, but who knows what future years will hold. And, if there's figures on that list, I get that this feels like a chance to get them in your collection. And if you don't get them now, who knows when you'll get them. So I guess some anxiety there. Patrick saying, this is my first vote. I really like how Four Horsemen does this. really helps us who are just starting out. That's the whole point, man. If you checked out on sourcehorseman.com, I published an article this Tuesday, yesterday, all about the All-Stars voting history. So all the way back to All-Stars 1, 2, 3, and then obviously now, they gave some history. And I mean, the All-Stars vote started because when 1.0 was released, there was a much smaller community of people that were into the line. So one of the things I said in that post was when when Mythic Legions 1.0, that Kickstarter happened, there was like maybe 1,100 people that backed the Kickstarter. So not a huge number. Just 2 years later, when they did the Advent of Decay Kickstarter, the number of backers grew by 60%. So 60%, I mean, that's a sizable number to jump in that short a period of time. It's grown even faster since that point. More and more, every time they do a sale, it's more and more fans jumping on board. So back then with 1.0, they totally realized that by the time the figures were in hand, there were lots of people who had been introduced to the line who wanted to get in. There were also people that didn't go all in, that once they started seeing figures like Sir Ignatius and Orange Steelhide, those were two not heavily ordered figures in 1.0, very, very low orders. But once people saw them in hand and they realized how cool like Sir Ignatius's pearl armor was, they immediately were like, oh, I want one. But they were made in such low numbers, there were none to go around. So you immediately saw prices on these things hitting $200-$300. That's where All-Stars came from. That was literally the Horsemen sitting down, because at the end of the day, they're toy fans as well. They get it. They want fans like you to have access to these figures. Not for nothing, Cornboy did an interview with the Legions cast guys where he told you, he admitted they make more money when they do a new line than when they do All-Stars. Everyone, I've heard people say so many times, if they just reissued all of 1.0, they'd make so much money. You know what? They make more money if they did a new wave. The sales prove that. Whenever they do brand new stuff, it's a bigger sale for them than when they do an All-Stars wave. But they're not only doing it to maximize sales. Obviously, they want sales to stay in business, but they want to support the fans. And that's why the All-Stars have become such an important part of this line. Honestly, I've been a toy collector for 30 years. I cannot think of any other toy line that regularly reissues figures through a fan vote. You know, I've seen lots of lines reissue figures here and there. Certainly, there's many lines that do new versions of figures, but to actually go and reissue old sold-out characters based on direct fan feedback, I don't know anyone else doing it. And it is a testament to how much the Horsemen love the fans. Drunk Gizmo, I agree with you completely. I think it's true with any of the Mythic Legions figures. You truly don't appreciate any of these characters until you get them in hand. I 100% agree. I've long said I've been fortunate that since the beginning, I've been able to go all in. There are many, many figures that when I went all in on 1.0, there were figures that I honestly intended on getting and flipping, just selling. I got them because I was like, well, it's a little bit cheaper to get the all in, so I'll just flip these and, you know, make some money back on them. I'm sure I can get what I paid for them. When I got them in hand, they blew my mind. Sir Gideon Heavensbrand is an example. I didn't really like Sir Gideon Heavensbrand when I first saw pictures. You get him in hand and absolutely blows your mind. Today, with the photography that Trevor Williams, 1/6 shooter, is doing, the figures themselves look way better. But even with Trevor's amazing photography, yeah, once you get these things in hand, having them tangible, there's nothing like that. Greg, what figure? Oh, I clicked the wrong one. Let's see. What figures do you think have the lowest production numbers? Definitely some of the early 1.0 stuff. One figure that I'm going to talk about down the road that I think has very, very low production runs from Series 1 is Sir Galeron. I think he's very small numbers. I actually think Sir Owain is pretty small numbers as well. I think I talked about this last week. I think a lot of people for 1.0, they looked at Sir Owain and they looked at Silver Knight Legion Builder, and they're the same general build. And they said, well, at the time, Legion Builder, Silver Knight Legion Builder was $18. Sir Galeron was 33. So I know a lot of people were like, it's almost double the price for a few paint apps. I'm just going to get the Silver Knight Legion Builder. Now, they're both hard as hell to find today, but I think that was definitely one of the reasons why characters like Owain were made in, smaller numbers. Let me see. Okay. Yeah, Mina, I like how they're doing faction-specific themed waves with the latest pre-order. Yeah, that's very cool. I mean, they've already said that, the 4 big waves, they're going to do the Horseman waves, starting with Erethair, going to Alithia, and then we have 2 more, Poxus and Necronominus. That kind of faction, that evil faction versus heroic faction, that's a model that they're going to use. I like it just because you get to really bolster the ranks of a faction all in one wave. So I think that'll be really, really cool. So I think you're answering Sir Valgard as the least produced figure. He's actually not. Sir Valgard, the only reason people mention that is because he was the Kickstarter exclusive in 1.0. So he won't be sold again. They've already said that they won't reissue that figure, at least not in that fashion. But they made more Sir Valgards in 1.0 than some of those other figures in 1.0 that also haven't been re-released. Now, some of those other figures could see a reissue. Sir Owain is certainly in the vote this time. Sir Galeron is not. So we'll see. Okay, so that's what's going on for the vote right now. Once again, it ends this Friday at 3. Keep your eyes peeled for announcements after that vote is done. We've got a lot of work to do on our end, but we're going to do it as quickly as possible so you can find out who has won the vote. Other things going on right now. That's the big news, right? That's the big thing. Mythic Legions Tactics, I do have an update on that, actually. They did send an email out to all the backers. Part of their team is located in Texas. Obviously, Texas has been getting hit really, really hard, with weather that it's just unprecedented for them. So they are working on the backer kit now. They are taking all of those pledges that you did, because you had to make separate pledges. They're combining pledges together so people get one unified pledge that they can vote on, or not vote, but they can work towards. You're going to get an email from Backer Kit that basically says, okay, you pledged $500. How do you want to spend it? One piece of information that I talked about previously, unfortunately, that was amended after I did the video. I did a live stream on the Facebook Cabal a while ago that said the bonus heads were only going to be in pledges that were before Backer Kit. And I even said, I don't know how they're going to actually do that logistically, but that's what they said. They've gotten rid of that plan. Thankfully, it was a bad plan. They heard everyone say that's not cool. We want to add more, possibly in Backer Kit. Bottom line, that goes away. Everything from this initial campaign, whether you backed it during the period, whether you backed a small piece and you want to add some more in Backer Kit, which you can certainly do, any figures that you add during that entire period will include the 5th bonus head for all of the deluxe builder figure. So that's very, very cool. If you're asking when those figures might ship, Durku, it's going to be a little while. That just happened. Production takes months and everything. Even though there's no new tooling in those are definitely not going to be probably towards the latter half of the year. Awesome. So with that, let's move on to the topic at hand. Once again, it is conversations, so you can hit me up there in the chat. The topic today is the title I posted for today's talk is the time before Legions. So what I thought would be really interesting is to look at some of those previous Four Horsemen Studios waves, or lines, I should say, figures, and just kind of look at how they brought us to where we are today. Now, I'm going to give you a huge disclaimer. Whenever I post literally anything, people think there's a hidden message in it. Sometimes there legitimately is. Sometimes I'm having fun and I post things that are meant to be a little foreshadowing. Other times I'm not, and people read into them. I'm very clearly telling you, I'm not doing tonight's show because any of these figures are coming back or because any of this is on the agenda. This is legitimately me just wanting to have this conversation, wanting to talk about previous Four Horsemen Studios releases. I'm going to be very clear. The Horsemen have said this many, many times. The molds for all of the figures we're going to look at today, with the exception of the birds, the molds for all of these are gone. Okay? There are no Scarabus molds. There are no Zetheus molds. There are no Ramathor molds left. They're all gone. That, on top of that, a lot of people have said, can they do updated versions of these characters? They've been very, very clear in saying they want to move forward with new characters. While we may see similar type figures, their first figures were Zetheus, the Minotaur. We've got Minotaurs. We've seen Minotaurs in the line. We just got one in AllStars 3. So we may see figures that are some similar fantasy tropes to stuff that they've explored in these past lines, but these are not coming back. So giant disclaimer, I'm honestly telling you the truth here. I'm not pulling your chain. These aren't coming back. This is just me wanting to talk about these toys, because the reality is I've had all of these toys for a really, really long time. I've said before that I started collecting Four Horsemen when they were at McFarlane Studios. And then when they opened their own studio, I followed them. And all the way back in 2006, when they released their first figures as part of their fantastic exclusive series, I was on board backing those figures, and I've had them ever since. So this is something that I am really excited about. I'm really passionate about. And I know a lot of new Mythic Legions fans don't know who these figures are. I repeatedly see people post and they say, what is this figure? And it's one of the old Seventh Kingdom or old Gothitropolis figures. So I thought it would be a lot of fun tonight to look at this and talk about it. Very funny, Anthony. If we play the episode backwards, he will tell us we're getting birds again. Awesome. Okay. Quick drink and then we'll continue. Gets tough talking for 90 minutes. Throat gets dry. Awesome. Okay. So I just mentioned that all the way back in 2006 was the first in-house studio release from Four Horsemen Studios. And they did this as part of a process they called Fantastic Exclusive. So it's kind of relevant tonight because we're talking about AllStars and we're talking about how the Horsemen, really try to make the line fan friendly by asking for their advice. Well, guess what? The first toy they ever produced was totally done through the input from fans. Back then, it was done on a message board, a forum. This was the time long before, Facebook and that kind of social media. Their forum was really where they engaged with fans. And what they did was a voting process where it started with a number of properties they had created. Seventh Kingdom, Gothitropolis, Zodiac Pack, Symbiotech. All of these were different properties that they had created. And then you got to see a couple characters from each one of those properties and a little bit of information about them. And then after that, you voted. So for that first wave, there was a line called Seventh Kingdom that won. Now, if you're interested in going a little bit deeper into the lore of some of these old lines, I would advise that you check out sourcehorseman.com. And I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. So let's see here. Let me share my screen. Okay. So right now you're seeing the Source Horseman website. So if you go to this website, underneath this, link at top that says updates, there's the Tactical Communications blog. If you click the blog, and I post on the blog every single Tuesday, right? If you look on the blog, this is basically just a stream of all of the different articles chronologically from the most recent. You can see this one was just posted yesterday. What is a Mythic Legions All-Star? You can just scroll down and see everything, or there's a number of articles categories up here, okay? There's a section called Blast from the Past. If you click that, you're going to get a whole bunch of articles about previous lines. A lot of what we're going to talk about today is actually also covered in articles in here. And there's actually articles, for instance, there's one, Blast from the Past, Exploring the Seventh Kingdom. So this is all about the property itself and kind of the history behind that story, that line. So if you're interested in the conversation tonight and you want to read more, check out that section of sourcehorseman.com. Wealth of information there. But Seventh Kingdom, the general story was, there was all this different warring and all of these different kingdoms, all these different kinds of races and characters decided to split their world into 6 distinct kingdoms. But when they did so, they kind of screwed up the math, and there was a larger 7th kingdom in the middle that was basically off limits. And now they're fighting over that 7th kingdom. And the kingdoms themselves, there was kind of the animal kingdom, there was the alien kingdom, there was the mutant kingdom, all these different kingdoms. So the first character that got made was from the animal kingdom. So as you know, I love my critters. I love the anthropomorphic figures, animal men, animal characters. And that was a big part of the reason why I really got into Four Horsemen, because some of their earliest figures were those animal characters, those anthropomorphic figures. So let's look now at the first one. The first figure that they released was a character called Zetheus. Zetheus was this blue minotaur. This was released all the way back in 2006. Absolutely gorgeous figure. It blows my mind when I look at this, thinking how long ago this figure was actually released. This is 15 years ago that this figure came up. I still have this in my collection. The one, not a new version, actually the one I had from 2006. And it holds up against today's standards. It holds up. I mean, first off, if you hold it up against most toy lines today, it blows them away. But if you hold it up to Mythic Legions, it works great. It looks so well side by side with them. It's a testament to the quality that they have had their entire careers. Beautiful, beautiful figure. This was the very first one. But what they did at the time, when they started releasing these figures, their use of parts, their reuse of parts that we see in Mythic Legions was evident back then. Now, these figures were not pop apart. Like, one of the great things about Mythic Legions, one of the reasons I certainly love them, is the customization aspect, that they're modular. You can pull them apart. The Seventh Kingdom figures weren't modular in that way, but what they did do was use those base figures and try to make a number of variants of that figure. So for that wave, which was called the names that they used, they're definitely challenging. I feel like Travis when I try to say these things. But the Minifian, I think it was the Minifian 7 or Minifian 6, even though there are 7 of them. This is a look at all of those figures that were available in that line. So you can see Zetheus, the blue minotaur, right in the middle there. Now, back then, what they did was, now if you know Mythic Legions, you know they don't do exclusives. They do show debuts. So they've had figures that debut at PowerCon and at ToyCon New Jersey and at ZoloCon, but they're always figures that are available elsewhere. As part of a pre-order, for instance. Back then, when they did these figures, they did offer them all on Store Horseman. You could buy like a full set of them on Store Horseman, but if you wanted individual figures, you had to kind of chase them down. So they had one here that was available on a website called Raving Toy Maniac. I think one of them was Toy Fair. One of them actually was a Store Horseman exclusive. The cow that's all the way at the end there was only available from Store Horseman. You know, if you look at these, there's the Royal Guardsman, which is the cow. There's the, I believe it's Defender of the Fiery Crater, which is the red one. There's the I think Arctic Tundra, which is the light blue. There's Zetheus, the Keeper of the Black Labyrinth. I can't remember all the names. There's a forest one, and then it's actually, I think the Black Labyrinth is the one at the end. I actually forget them all just by looking at them. I'd have to actually look at the list. Wonderful, wonderful figures. And actually, I have a couple of them right here. This is one I've shown on the show before. This one took me years to actually acquire. I only got this last year. I got this from a gentleman named Joshua Van Pelt, good friend of the studio, who hooked me up, helped me actually finally complete my collection. I'm a loose collector, as you can see, but I was so excited to get this. And honestly, I have every one of the other Minotaurs in the case already, and it makes a nice even number. So I was like, I don't know what I should do with this one. So I've ended up leaving this one in the package, but they're gorgeous, gorgeous figures. I do have another one here. This like light grayish one. All it really is, and I mean, I'm not a super articulation junkie. I know some people are. I mean, it moves fairly well. Gorgeous figure. Basically what they did was they took the Zetheus body, they changed around a few pieces. The belt is different. It's obviously a different head. All of the variant figures have different heads. Zetheus has, all of the variants have this head, little movable jaw. The Zetheus has a different one. These were produced in really, really small numbers. If memory serves me correctly, I believe Zetheus was a run of 500 pieces, and the variants were 250 each. So only 250 of these. These are why if you see these on the market, they usually command a pretty penny, because they are honestly a little piece of Horseman history. Gorgeous figures. Definitely blend in really, really well with Mythic Legions. And looking at these, like I said, you can start to see their creativity, their design sensibility come through. Because the reality is the work that they've done for McFarlane, the work they've done for Mattel, the work they've done for all the different companies, Super 7 now and beyond that. They've done work for NECA and Sideshow and Hasbro. Those are all work for hire. Those are all projects. As amazing as those figures are, they had someone to answer to. They had someone that gave them a creative brief, and they had to follow certain guidelines to create whatever they were hired to do. The reason I love looking at their original work, especially these older pieces, is it is really a glimpse at the creativity of the studio, where the only bounds, the only restrictions placed upon them were their own imaginations, the own limitations that they set for themselves. So I really love looking at these, especially from, like I said, that historical perspective. Let me check out some comments here and see what people are saying. Going to watch the rest on replay? No problem, Pilgrim. You have a good one. So very, very cool. So that was all the way back in 2006. The next wave that they did, the next voting process that they did was 2008, or at least the figures came out in 2008. And these were also won by the Seventh Kingdom property. But the figure that was made was a character called Ramathor. So Ramathor, the elephant swordsman, is one of my all-time favorite figures. Not Horseman figures, favorite figures. It is a beast of a figure. Absolutely gorgeous. Okay, so I say it's a beast of a figure, right? Check this out. If you want to know how big that figure is, look at this comparison figure, this comparison piece here. Oh, that's the wrong one. Showed the wrong one there. Let me find the one that I actually want. There it is. It's tough when I just see file names and I don't actually know what they are. Here we go. So this is a shot of Ramathor side by side with Kurzog, the ogre scale figure from the Siege of Bjorngar wave. That's a 9-inch scale figure. If you're into Mythic Legions, you probably have one of those ogre scale figures in your collection. That is how Ramathor stacks up against those figures. He is an absolute beast of a figure. Gorgeous, incredible detail. Unfortunately, if you know anything about the history of Ramathor, he had a very difficult, birth into this world. So the story with Ramathor is he's a huge figure, and he was voted that way by the fans. The fans voted for him to be that large. When they went to produce it at the factory, they ran into some problems. He is a giant figure, and when they got the first runs of them back, they were very, very loose. The joints were very, very floppy. If you've ever bought one of these figures on the secondary market, which is the only way you're going to get them today, you may have gotten a figure that you're surprised by how floppy it is. This is the Ramathor I have had since 2008. And you can see that I have a figure stand behind that giant sword. Look at that thing. This is literally outside of the Ice Troll sword. This is like the biggest weapon I've seen them do. It is massive. But you can see I have a figure stand here. That is because the figures themselves from this wave, from this line, some of them are problematic when it comes to standing, between their general heft and the size of the figures and the fact that the factory had some problems producing them. The limbs were very, very floppy. What happened at the time was the Horsemen went back to the factory and they said, hey, we've got some problems. We've got to fix this. Unfortunately, the factory disappeared. The factory just shut down, stopped doing business, and they had almost no recourse. Making it even worse, the steel molds that were used to make these figures were left unattended. Those steel molds are the biggest investment when it comes into making these figures. They're tens of thousands of dollars. So to lose those molds was absolutely crushing for a small toy company like Four Horsemen Studios. Thankfully, they have some friends in the industry. Of course, they do. They've been doing it for so long. They've worked with so many people. Some friends were able to swing in and help get some representatives in China to the factory to retrieve those molds. The molds were damaged, but they were repairable. They repaired the molds and did a whole second run of these figures. Now, I remember this as a fan. I remember getting one of the floppy elephants and being told, look, we're going to do another run at our cost. If you want to send it back, we'll send you a new figure. I was honestly fine with it. I used a stand. I put it up. I never returned it, but I know a lot of people did. So there are actually 2 runs for all these figures. The biggest difference, if you look at the second runs, the joints are ratcheted. So if you actually move the joints and it's got a ratchet in it, that is the second run. If there's no ratchet, odds are it is probably a first run figure. So I love Ramathor, and just like they did with that first wave, they did a number of other kinds of characters. So check this out. These are the other characters that they did to join Ramathor. So you can see Ramathor up in the top corner there. They also did a couple other elephant figures. And once again, this was the process or the format where you could buy all of these figures as an all-in essentially from Store Horseman, or you had to go and pick and choose, and you had to get these from, October Toys and from Raving Toy Maniac and figures.com and etc. They were all different places. And what I really liked about this wave was with the Minotaur wave, as cool as the variants were, they were just color variants. We had 2 heads. We had the head on Zetheus, the main Minotaur, and the head that came on everybody else. With this wave, we got some new heads, and those new heads allowed them to create some new kinds of characters, some new types of animal people. So we not only got the elephant head on Ramathor, we also got a second elephant head that we found on 4 figures: the gray elephant, the yellow elephant, the red elephant, and hysterically, the pink elephant. If you want to hear a funny story about that pink elephant, check out the article about that character, which is the Chalice of Goodenough. That is the name of the character, the Chalice of Goodenough. Check that character out, the story on AllStars Horseman. CB tells a really funny story about the character naming and actually how that character came to be. But in addition to those elephants, we also got a hippo, a rhino, a boar, and then this crazy looking mutant that they used for both that red and green mutant. Those were some of the bad characters, the evil characters that were part of Seventh Kingdom. They were the first characters that came from a different kingdom, actually, because all of the Minotaurs and all of these anthropomorphic characters here all came from the animal kingdom, whereas those two mutants came from the mutant kingdom. Again, absolutely awesome, awesome figures. I've got another picture to show here that shows a couple of the elephants, I believe. Find that. So here's another picture of a few of the elephants. They had removable helmets. So if you have a couple of them like I do, I have this whole way. I actually don't have the mutants. I never got the mutants for some reason, but I do have all of the animal characters. I have all the elephants and so forth. So you can take the helmet off and you get a slightly different look that's kind of cool for the display. So despite the troubled birth of that character, they pushed forward, they got fans their figures, and if you try to hunt these suckers down today, again, you're going to pay quite a bit. This, again, probably my favorite figure. Let me grab that Minotaur just so you can kind of see a comparison there. You know how much bigger it is. Just an absolutely massive figure. Gorgeous figure. I love having it. Now, after that, the next vote they did, the next fantastic vote, was actually won by a whole new property, a whole new toy property, and that was called Gothitropolis. So Gothitropolis was this idea of this, it was very, monster based, as opposed to being all these different kingdoms and very animal heavy. It was very, very monster based. But before they did that, before they could produce the figure that won that, they did go back and do another Seventh Kingdom figure. One moment, I'm going to read a couple questions here. Anthony, I told you this is not a sneak. We're not getting a re-release of the elephant. I told you. Drunk Gizmo, are the other figures the same size as Ramathor? They absolutely are. They all use the same body. So the actual base body of Ramathor, all they did across the different figures was change the belt. But the arms, the torso, the legs, those are all the same. The belt and the head's really the only things that are different from Ramathor to the others. So all of those figures, all of those elephants, the hippo, the rhino, the warthog, the mutants, they're all the exact same size, the exact same profile. Gorgeous figures, crazy heavy. Like heavy, actually way heavier than the ogres are for Mythic Legions. Yeah, Eric says a hippo. The hippo's great because he's got this giant maw. He's like yelling, and the way his head goes back, you can make him so he's like screaming. It's actually awesome. So as I was saying, before they got to be winner of the third Fantastic exclusive, they decided to do another character from Seventh Kingdom, from the Human Kingdom, and it was their first female figure. It was a character called Queen Alexandra. So I'm going to show you this. We'll look at this character, and then we'll look at some of the variants that they did for her. Okay. Got this giant list of stuff to show, so I got to dig through it and find it. So that's all of them. Of course, that's not what I wanted to show because that's the kind of night I am having tonight, it looks like, right? Maybe I should look at these before I bring them up. That's not fun. This is more fun. Guess what? That's not what I wanted to show you either. Oof, I'm batting 1,000. Well, I'll tell you what. There were 3 possible files I could have shown, and I picked the first 2. So this has got to be the one I want. And it is. So this is the queen figure that they did. There's actually two versions of this character. You can see she's painted here to look like she has kind of leggings on, which is appropriate since she's wearing, a fur kind of cloak. I imagine it's a little cold there in her kingdom. But there is actually another one that they refer to as the swimsuit version, where she's got bare legs and I believe a bare midriff as well. There is an article all about this character on Source Horseman. So if you want to look at that, you can certainly check it out and see some more pictures and some more history on this figure. Very, very cool figure. And again, was the first of the female figures they did. But what I showed a minute ago was the variants that they did for this as well. So let's look at those variants, because the variants of this were some of the most varied figures that they did in the entire line. I'm going to make this a little bit larger here. So you can see that we've got the Queen Alexandra over here. Then we had another human character that was the evil character, Isadora. We got a number of cat characters. So they did go back to the animal kingdom. They did a number of those characters. They did a black cat, a tiger-looking cat, kind of a white snow leopard cat, a blue cat. Very, very, varied there. They also did a couple mutants and some more like machine-like looking characters. It was the most varied of all the lines that they had done to date. Again, if you look at the article on Source Horseman, you can certainly see better photos of all of these characters. And once again, these were offered at a number of different online retailers. You can kind of see the logos there for the Fwoosh and Raving Toy Maniac and so forth. Now, these figures, honestly, I don't think sold as well as some of the other figures around before then. And I only say that because I can remember this was the first line that I didn't jump in on personally. I do have some of them now, but I've gotten them after the fact. I think that around the time that those came out, my collecting was changing a little bit. And I've never been a huge female figure collector. Honestly, until Legions, female figures were not ones that I got a ton of. I think probably the only other example of that would be Toy Biz, like the Toy Biz and Hasbro with Marvel Legends, because those characters I like to build out teams. So, you need the female characters with the team. But until Mythic Legions, I wasn't a huge female figure collector. So when that line came out, I didn't jump on it right away. I got them after the fact. And I honestly think a handful of people did that because I remember them sticking around in the store for quite some time after the fact. I remember them actually picking up speed when Mythic Legions first came out. So when Mythic Legions first came out and 1.0 shipped and 1.5 shipped and Covenant of Shadow shipped, what was everybody asking for? Female characters. There were no females in the line because of the way the line was tooled. The initial way the line was built was, we're going to create a parts library and we're going to create a whole bunch of different characters based off that parts library. So by design, when you only have 3 different torsos, you're going to make characters that are all the same kind of build. In this case, they were all the same gender. So it wasn't until we got Advent of Decay that we started seeing those female characters, along with the more slender characters like elves and goblins and so forth. But before Advent of Decay shipped, a lot of people started looking at Seventh Kingdom, at the Queen. It was called the Queen's Council wave. They started looking at that and saying, you know what? I think that I can fudge those into my display and I can have some Four Horsemen Studios female characters. Again, what am I doing tonight? Not number 3, number 2. So here's an example of the Queen and the evil character whose name is Isidora, along with two characters you're probably very familiar with, Gorgo Aetherblade, as well as Attlus the Conqueror. And you can see how these characters measure up. And interestingly, I actually have them displayed. I have the Queen displayed as a member of the House of the Noble Bear. I have Isidora displayed alongside Gorgo, almost as like an evil witch, almost like an Evil Lyn type character. That's what she always reminded me of. So very, very cool. Love these figures. And this is when I got these. I said that I didn't get these at the time of release. I got them after the fact. That was when I grabbed them. But it's interesting to see these first pass female figures and see some of the things that they learned. Because remember, a big part of what I am doing tonight is, as part of this history lesson, I like looking back at these old figures and figuring out, how they learn their lessons along the way. And with these particular figures, if you've got the female figures from those lines, the biggest knock on them is that they were very fragile. Their weapons broke almost immediately out of the box. They were very, very thin. They were very, very detailed. They snapped all the time. It is actually, if you're going to buy a loose one, you oftentimes will buy a loose one with a broken staff because they were so fragile. Additionally, the limbs tended to be very, very, fragile and stuff. Night and day from what we eventually got with Mythic Legions females. And I remember at the time when they started saying they were going to do female figures, a lot of people that had the Queen's Council expressing some concern. This is just an example of the studio learning their lesson. Everything that they do, they're constantly striving to be better tomorrow than they were today. And that is a great, great thing for any organization, for any company to be doing. You absolutely see that in the growth of these lines from Seventh Kingdom to Gothitropolis to Mythic Legions. Now, in addition to those, so remember, we still haven't talked about the character that won the third voting for the Fantastic Exclusive. They released the females first because they were going to be less expensive for them to create. Additionally, the first figures that actually came out for Gothitropolis are some other figures that a lot of people have grabbed and kind of fudged into their Mythic Legions displays, and those are the Timekeepers. So these fun little kind of miniature demons, they're very, very small figures. They were small boxed figures. I think at the time they might have retailed for like $10 or something. They were not expensive figures. These are other figures that are notorious for being fragile. They are so incredibly small. Those hammers that they wield, which are called the chrono hammers, those chrono hammers, it is very difficult to find a loose one of these where those hammers have not broken. They're just very, very small. Additionally, a lot of times the hands pop off, and they also all have different little ankle attachments, like little wings in their ankles. Those tend to be lost as well. So it is a little hard to find these intact unless they are already boxed, but they are super, super fun figures. I have all of them on display in my collection, and these were released in advance of Scarabus. They're actually meant to go with Scarabus, which is the character who won the third Mythic Legions, or I should say the third Fantastic Exclusive fan vote. If you do find these on the market today, those figures stuck around forever. There were points that you could buy them by the case on storehorseman.com, but in just evidence of how the popularity of Mythic Legions has caused a lot of people to go back into the Horseman's catalog and search for some of these old figures. Try to get your hands on a boxed Timekeeper today, and you're actually going to pay a pretty penny for them. They do sell pretty high. Not as high as some of the Queen figures, certainly not as high as the elephants or the minotaurs, but they're still not as cheap as they once were. And that brings us to Lord Scarabus, or Scarabus. I think is it Lord? Definitely Scarabus. So Scarabus was the character that won the third Mythic Legions fan vote. And he was a really cool demonic looking figure. Really fits in very, very well, in my opinion, with Mythic Legions. Let me find this character and I will show it to you. He's one that won the vote. It's 10. I need Scarabus number 10. That is the name of the file. Bring this up for you. So this is what the character looks like. And you may have seen this character around. He's actually one of the ones that I believe most Mythic Legions fans, if they have one of the old figures in their collection, it's probably one of the Scarabus figures or one of the birds. The birds are the most common, and it kind of works backwards in terms of which ones are most common, I think. So I've seen a lot of people who have these. Some of these figures stuck around for a while as well. Actually, after we're done talking about Scarabus, when we start talking about the Gothitropolis birds, when they actually did that Kickstarter, some of the rewards were actually for this Scarabus figure, this base figure. One of the things I love about this figure that was some of the first things we started seeing, where we started seeing an influence that we would get with Mythic Legions, is this was the first wave that had swappable heads. So prior to this wave, prior to this Gothitropolis release, we got variants of the figures with different heads, but every figure came with one head. When we got to this particular wave, what we started to see was that they did variants, but those variants came with multiple heads. So let me show you what all the variants in this line looked like. You can see the main Scarabus figure in the middle, and then along the edges, you can see all of these other characters they did. There's Demon Fire Scarabus, there's Dormant Form Scarabus. Those used a faceplate. So what you actually would do was, though, that the horns that you see on the character's head, you could leave that head on, and just the face piece you would pop off. So it was like a little face that just plugged right in. And the original Scarabus came with 3 different faces. So those variant faces are also what they used for some of the other characters here. But then you had characters, as you get lower down, that you see these characters with totally different heads, including the Azazel and the Horus figures that have the ram heads. Those were not just faceplates. Those were purely separate heads that popped onto this figure. You also have what I call the Egyptian trio. So the Egyptian trio were by far the most popular of all of these figures. They were variants that were done that had heads that were very indicative of characters from Egyptian mythology. These are by far some of the priciest old Four Horsemen Studios figures that you will find on the secondary market. Okay, so in the middle here, you have Anubis, you have Horus, and you have Thothos. And these are clearly based on the Egyptian deities of Anubis, Horus, and Thoth. Wonderful figures, great colors. All of these figures use the exact same body. So they didn't change anything on the bodies for these figures, which was actually a bit of a departure, because prior to these figures, like I said, they at least changed the belt up a little bit, or they tried to do a little bit something different to the characters themselves. These characters were all the same, with just the addition of these new heads and faceplates. But what I really liked was those additions. So all of these Egyptian characters, those animal heads, the actual face is once again a faceplate. You can pop that head off, and it also came with an actual Scarabus face. So you can have a version of Scarabus in these unique colors, or you could have these characters. These are by far some of the most popular figures that Four Horsemen Studios have done, and these figures absolutely flew out of the store when they were available, because this was the first line that they stopped doing those store exclusives with Raving Toy Maniac and Toy Fair Magazine and so forth. This was a line that was delayed over the years, and they actually did it only on storehorseman.com. And this would have been around, let's see, these came out, Scarabeus, in, I believe it was around like 2011-ish, 2011, 2012, as I believe when Scarabeus came out. Absolutely gorgeous figures. Again, if you check out sourcehorseman.com, it's a whole article on Scarabeus that will go in deeper to this one. But when I look at those figures, and again, they work wonderfully with Mythic Legions. If you want to see how they compare side by side, let me bring that up. And a great picture that I actually shot this picture for that Scarabeus article. And it shows that main Scarabeus character alongside some of the big baddies at, in the realm of mythos. We've got Gorgo and Urzak, along with Malachi Cinderhorn and King Noglin. Some of the biggest, baddest characters in the realm of mythos hanging out with Scarabeus, Lord of the Undead. So you can see how he scales. He actually stands a bit taller than some of the Mythic Legions figures. Gorgo's a bit larger than him with those antlers. But if we just do like feet to tip of head, he stands a little bit taller. Great figure, wonderfully detailed, but definitely going to run you something on the market these days. But when I look at these, I really start seeing those swappable parts. That's where I think that the lesson that they learned from this for Mythic Legions. So now this brings us to what I would consider the more modern Four Horsemen Studios story. All of those previous figures are ones that were done years ago. They were done through storehorseman.com, fantastic exclusive voting, or at least characters that, like the Queen, she was never a fan voted character, but she was part of the fan vote at the time. She just lost out to Zetheus and Ramathor. This was a period where the toy industry was changing dramatically. And what was happening was the cost of producing figures was just skyrocketing. Remember, figures are plastic. They're made out of oil. So when oil prices rise, the cost of producing figures rises as well. And all of these figures, if we think about Mythic Legions today, we think about the business model that the Four Horsemen employ. The business model they had Kickstarter, now they have pre-orders, but they both follow a similar format in that they offer figures for sale for a period of time. You place a pre-order. You don't have to worry about it selling out because it's not a limited quantity. They are going to make based on what is ordered. Now, they don't make exactly to order. They make more than that because they want to have some extras for, quality assurance, and they want to have extras for sales. So whether these are sales at toy shows and cons, whether these are sales online at like Store Horseman during the in-stock sale, those are all above and beyond the initial pre-orders. But the money from those pre-orders allows the Horsemen to produce the figures. That's how it's always been. Remember, the success of Mythic Legions has really opened up a lot of doors for Four Horsemen Studios. But back before Mythic Legions and before the Kickstarter campaign that we're going to talk about in a moment, they were a very small company, and there were definitely some challenging times along the way. If you think back to what I talked about with Ramathor, can you imagine a small company doing a whole run of figures and getting them in, and they're not right? And then when you go to the factory to say, hey, you need to fix this, the factory is out of business, so you have to take it upon yourself to fix this problem. It's a testament to their devotion to their fans, but those could not have been easy times. And that was long before I was involved with the studio. Again, that's when I was just a fan. I was buying Ramathor from the website to have for my collection. Got to the point where they'd done another fantastic exclusive and another character from Gothitropolis won. It was a character called the Black Raven. The problem was they just didn't have the money to produce the figure. This is a point where a friend of theirs named George Gaspar introduced them to Kickstarter. So George Gaspar is actually the G in G-Con. If you've ever wondered where the name G-Con, their annual conference, comes from, it was named in honor of their friend George Gaspar. George introduced them to Kickstarter. And this model, and this was back in, actually, I have my notes right. Where's my phone? I have my notes right here. 2013? Yes, 2013. 2013 was when they first went forward with their first Kickstarter. And that was for the Ravens line, the figure that had won the Gothitropolis vote for the Fantastic Exclusive. That was what was actually produced. So let me bring that character up here. And this is one that a lot of fans are going to be more familiar with. You may have seen some stuff in my early pictures where you're like, I've never seen that character before. You've absolutely, I guarantee you, seen some of these because, like I said, these are more modern characters. These are characters that a lot more fans have. They were produced in larger numbers. They reached a much wider audience. So this character, whose name is actually Decimus Harabin, known as the Black Raven, this is a character from Gothitropolis, and it was the first figure offered as part of their Kickstarter. Like they've done in the past, they wanted to do variants of the figures. So what they did with this toy was the Black Raven. They also did a white version. They're the only two that come with that specific weapon. All the others came with a different spare, but it was all the same body, painted different colors and different heads. And because they were doing birds, just like they had done with the elephants, where they could take that body and say, hey, that body also works as a hippo or as a rhino. They were able to do that with the birds as well and put a whole bunch of different bird heads on that body in order to create some really cool characters. So this is a look at the entire lineup. And you can see that it was a mix of like realistic birds, or as realistic as, you know, anthropomorphic bird warriors can be. But I mean, we got a falcon and we got a vulture and we got a rooster. We even got a flamingo. We also got more mythical type characters like a phoenix, a griffin, and one of my favorites, the Quetzalcoatl. Absolutely love that green feathered Quetzalcoatl right there. In fact, I have one here. If you know anything about this character's name is Ramirez, which is named after, if you know, Iz from the Mythic Legions Cabal, the old Four Horsemen boards, longtime friend of the studio. Is the Wiz does some really fun reviews here on YouTube. This was a character that he had lobbied for years. He really wanted this character, this Quetzalcoatl. So he lobbied and they made this character and they named it in his honor. I actually have on my leg a tattoo of a Quetzalcoatl. And when I was getting it, I wanted a tattoo of that mythological creature. I was looking at different pictures online and I said to myself, what am I doing? I have a perfect Quetzalcoatl to get a tattoo of. So I actually brought this exact toy to the tattoo parlor with me, and the tattoo artist had it on her shelf while she gave me a tattoo. And I say while she gave me a tattoo, it was like 5 different settings because it's a giant, giant tattoo. But I actually have this character tattooed on my leg. Very, very cool. This one actually uses the green wings that came out much, much later. I've added a little bit of paint to them just to customize them a little bit. But gorgeous, gorgeous figures. This is what really started a lot of people getting back into Four Horsemen Studios, recognizing the studio, being aware of them. I can't show a picture of the tattoo right now, guys. I'm sorry. It's on my leg. It would be really weird and awkward. I promise I'll take pictures someday and I'll post them. For me personally, this was when I got back into Four Horsemen Studios. Amazingly, I had skipped the Scarabus wave. The only ones that I had really loved were the Egyptian ones. And by the time I jumped on board, they had all sold out. I told you I had already skipped the females. So I hadn't really been around Four Horsemen Studios. I was aware of them like kind of tangentially, but I was collecting some other stuff at that point. I knew them from the McFarlane days. I had long moved on from McFarlane, as had they. So they were kind of off my radar. But remember, I love the animal characters. So when I saw the Kickstarter they were doing, I knew Four Horsemen Studios. I loved the figures. So I went and I bought a handful of them. I think I bought like 6 of them. I backed the Kickstarter for like 6 different birds. And the minute I got them in, I regretted not going all in. So I ended up going on the secondary market and buying a full wave of them. And these figures, you think Mythic Legions are crazy. When these figures hit, so many people who had slept on this immediately wanted them. I got lucky that I slept on some of these figures. I realized the error of my ways pretty early and grabbed them all. A lot of other people weren't so lucky. These figures were going for $350 regularly on the secondary market. They were incredibly desirable, so much so that actually probably one of the first All-Star waves that was done was actually the Avian All-Stars, where they reissued the Black Raven, the White Raven, the Quetzalcoatl. Who else did they do? The Vulture. I'm not sure. I can't remember who else was up there. Yeah, they reissued a bunch of them, and they were absolutely gorgeous figures. You know what? Yeah. These came out around the same time as another wave of birds, and I'm jumping a little bit here, another wave of birds that we all know because they were the first ones that were branded in the Mythic Legions packaging. So in the Mythic Legions packaging, we got the Etheron's Dozen wave, which was a really, really interesting wave because it gave us a key character in the story of Mythic Legions, right? It gave us Etheron, the Golden Eagle, who you see at the top here. But what they did was they continued to use that base body. The birds were so popular that they gave us a number of new birds. Now, some of these were repaints of the old heads. Colonel Domesticus, which is the chicken, that's a repaint of Cockatrice from the first wave. They had the Osprey, that was a repaint of the Falcon. They have the Blue Phoenix, that was a repaint of the Red Phoenix. But they also gave us some brand new characters. Probably the most popular one from this wave outside of Etheron is the Purple Dragon Draleon. Draleon is a very hard one to find. There was a point where all of these were somewhat readily available. Amazingly, a couple of them even went on clearance at Store Horseman at one point. But if you've been listening, you know the theme of the story is after these things get more popular, after more fans come in and they start hunting these down, things that were seemingly common at one point, the prices rise. So trying to get any of those figures today is probably going to run you in the 85 to 150 range. I'm going to look back at some comments because I've been rattling for a while and I know I missed some stuff. So let's see what I got here. Yeah, Chris back a while ago said the Minotaurs and the elephants are my favorite. Absolutely. Drew saying, I have Isadora, who's the evil female from the Queen's Council, with my skeletons as a necromancer. Love that. I totally can see that in the way she looks. Interesting point. I was mentioning the staffs from the Queen's Wave broke really easily. I wonder if that's why the staves are so thick with Mythic Legions. Very possibly. Anthony continues to try to troll me. Curtis here saying they're cool. I love the birds more, though. I need to get a Cardinus. Yeah, Cardinus, the red cardinal, is a gorgeous figure. as well as the Blue Jay. Originally, they were actually going to just repaint the cardinal head as a Blue Jay, but then they decided, no, you know what, a Blue Jay actually does have a different head, so they did a whole new head sculpt. Nick saying Gorgo must hate doors. Yeah, with those antlers on his helmet, I'm sure the doors aren't kind to him. Jennifer saying the birds are amazing. Yeah, the birds really, the thing with the birds is, that Kickstarter had some problems as well. When they got some of the initial samples, they had sized them a little incorrectly. So there were some delays in the birds, and I remember anxiously waiting for those. But when those landed in our hands, it was right around the time that the Mythic Legions Kickstarter was going to go live. And so the Kickstarter for the birds was 2013, and 2014 at a toy event in New York that the studio put on called Toypocalypse, they showed for the first time ever a line called Mythic Legions. And at the time, they intended them to be 4 inches. But what they showed on display were 2-ups. So 2-ups are figures that are literally sculpted at twice the size of what the figures are going to be. If you actually go to the studio, they have 2-ups of all of these. So all of these Minotaurs they have is these giant, like 12-inch figures. They're freaking awesome. Anyone who backed Mythic Legions Tactics for the intern for a day, when you go, I guarantee you all that cool stuff's going to be on display. Seeing 2-ups of these guys, amazing. But what they showed at Toypocalypse were these 2-up figures. But people loved them at that scale. And the success of the Ravens Kickstarter, which was, a 6-inch, 7-inch scale, really showed the studio that that's where they should probably be for Mythic Legions. Additionally, and I've talked about this history, but when they first were imagining Mythic Legions and they wanted people to build big armies, they really thought that price point was going to be a big part of that, because they totally misjudged the pure insanity of the Mythic Legions community and what we would be willing to spend on these figures. At the time, they really thought that 4-inch figures would be a lot cheaper, would make it easier for people to army build. But the reality was when they got the pricing back from the factory, the difference between 4-inch figures and like 7-inch figures was negligible. It was like a few dollars more maybe for the 7-inch figure. But if you look at a 4-inch figure and a 7-inch figure, you feel like there's so much more value in that larger figure. So they made the decision for a variety of reasons to move to that scale, which I was so thankful for, because I remember seeing those 4-inch figures. And at this point, I was back really excited about the Horseman. I had gone back after the Ravens and I'd gotten the Scarabaeus figures. I had hunted down, the Timekeepers. So I was really back into the studio. Even at the point, I didn't have all the Minotaurs or some of the elephants. I hunted those down. So I was really, really back into Four Horsemen Studios at this point. So when I saw Mythic Legions as a 4-inch scale line, I wasn't doing 4-inch. I was like, that's a bummer. I planned on getting Gorgo Aetherblade, so I thought he looked really cool. At the time, he wasn't even called Gorgo, because those pictures from Toypocalypse, those are not characters. They did not present. If you look at the pictures, and there's an article on the Source Horseman about this, you'll see Gorgo and Gideon, and you'll see Joran Runeshaper and Orange Steelhide and Scapular the Cryptbreaker. That's not any of them. They look like them, but these were before any of those characters had names. All of those designs were presented as just possible designs that they might do for this new toy line. But the reality is people loved those designs so much that those designs eventually became the characters that we know as Mythic Legions 1.0. And again, if we look at this chronology, we look at all of this process, how we got there, along the way, you can see the lessons learned. You can see how they built up and how this toy company that has so much experience, they use these experience not only in making toys for other people, but in creating these characters to give us what has resonated with toy fans like no other toy line I have seen. Mythic Legions is still a young line. The community is still so much smaller than what G.I. Joe or Transformers or Masters of the Universe has. Yet, if you're in the Mythic Legions community, you know that it is an incredibly passionate fan base, an incredibly supportive fan base like no other I've ever seen. And once again, I've been collecting for 30-something years. I've collected pretty much every toy line you can imagine. I've been a part of those communities. I've never seen anything like this. And all of that, everything they've learned along the way, in my opinion, has led to this point. Check out a few more comments, and then I actually do have a couple more things to show. Yeah, thank goodness they didn't go with 4-inch. Yeah, trust me, they say that every day. Excellent. Great history lesson. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm happy you enjoyed that. However, this is a customizing show by and large, so I figured I would leave you with a couple customs. I haven't done a lot of customs on like the Seventh Kingdom stuff, for instance. A lot of people have. Actually, if you look back, if you Google Four Horsemen Studios Seventh Kingdom custom, you will see that people back then, they took these figures, as rare as they are, and they tore them apart. So as limited as these figures were, the reason they're so hard to find today is even back then, people were tearing these apart to make different characters. I've seen people use this character, this Minotaur style character, to make all kinds of other anthropomorphic characters as well. There's a ton of them out there. So if you Google that, you will see that all the way back to when, Four Horsemen Studios first started, people were customizing their figures. But for myself, I don't have extras of these. At this point, trying to get extras to customize would be prohibitively expensive. So I've really never done that. Some figures that I have customized, however, are the birds. So I've had a lot of birds through my collection over the years. I've got a whole shelf of them up there. I still have plenty of them. I've had every single one of them at one point or another, but I got to the point where I had so many, and they are actually fairly similar that you get to a point where you got to pick and choose. So I have sold some off over the years, but I've also customized some as well. So I have a few customs that I will show here. The first one that I'm going to show is probably one of my actually favorite customs. I'm not just going to say one of my, favorite customs of the birds. It's one of my favorite customs just all around. And that is my Blue Jay Bandit. So there's a book that I read years ago called Inkheart. It's actually a series of books, Inkheart being the first one. But in the book Inkheart, there is a character that he kind of becomes a bandit, and he takes on the name the Blue Jay. That's what they refer to him as. So this idea of a Blue Jay Bandit, I had it in my head, and I was like, you know what? That would be fun. Now, because all of the birds do look very similar with the same armor, the same loin piece, the same belt, I wanted to provide some differentiation here. So what I decided to do was take my Blue Jay, which I love the figure itself, and actually turn him into a bit of a bandit, almost like a Robin Hood type character. The first thing I did was give him this like leathery type coat that was, from an old, I think, Toy Biz figure. I gave him a variety of different weapons and belts. And most importantly, I painted his wings. So I had seen someone online do something similar where these wings were originally just pretty much a flat blue. None of the wings have a lot of paint detail on them. So for this figure, I really wanted to paint those wings to match some of the other feathers that you see on the Blue Jay, but just with the addition of some accessories and a little bit of paint on those wings. I really, really like the way this character came, and he looks so distinctive with my other birds now. Thank you very much. Saying, love this custom. One of my favorites you've done. Love the painting on the wings. I did a poor imitation on mine. Jennifer, I'm sure that it's wonderful. Okay, so let's see what else I've got here. Looking at all my pictures to see what I haven't shown yet. Yeah, the Blue Jay is one that I really, really enjoy. He's right out front. He gets kind of like front billing when it comes to the customs on the bird shelf. So another one that I did that's not just a bird itself, but I did this one somewhat recently using bird parts. So that's one of the other things that I found some interest in as well, is using some of those parts from the birds, the wings and the feet, to create some different type characters. So this is a character, a race that I call a rockkin, R-O-C, rockkin. And it uses a wonderful, crazy looking head from Planetary Dog Toys. A lot of people saw this and they immediately saw one of those crazy characters from the movie Labyrinth. I didn't know what I wanted to use it for. Usually when I buy third-party heads, I have an idea how I want to use them, but sometimes a head is just so unique that I just imagine that I want to use it for something. I don't know what yet, but I've got to buy it. So this is one that I said I absolutely have to buy. Didn't know how I was going to use it, but I ended up creating this character. It uses a King Noglin body. Those bird feet do not fit into the legs perfectly, so they're kind of in there with a little bit of blue tack to keep them in place. But then what I did with the wings, this is a little trick that I've done with the wings a number of times. The wings on these figures, and I'll take this off and I'll show you. The wings on these figures actually move, okay? That you can pose them, but in part of posing them, they're actually two separate pieces. You can actually pop this larger piece off and you're just left with this smaller piece that pegs into the back of the figure. So for a small figure like what I just showed you, the rockkin, because he's on a goblin body, just by using the top parts of the wings, you get a different wing profile that I think looks really cool. So I had a lot of fun doing that. Of course, I have to show this as well. Credit where credit's due to Patrick Boyle. He's the first person that I remember showing this particular design, this particular custom, and that is a harpy. So one thing that a lot of people don't know is the bird characters, they do separate at the waist, and the actual waist part from, or the waist peg from the bird feet fits perfectly into the torso of the 2.0 figures. Actually, the arms from the birds fit perfectly in the arm ports of the 2.0 figures as well. So I remember when I got that Melina figure, the Motu tribute to Evil Lyn, I've said before that I don't display any of the Motu tribute characters as Motu tributes. I always try to do something different with them. And in this particular case, I had seen Patrick do a harpy design, and I immediately was like, that's what I'm going to do with Melina. So I used some pieces from the bird toy called Nimitus, which is an eagle toy. I used that with some brown wings to create that harpy type character. Actually, the only paint on that entire figure is, I believe, a little bit of paint on her belt. Everything else, those colors just worked really well together. Then I also did another one that uses pieces from Vultus the Vulture, along with some parts from Gwendolyn Heaven's brand to create a second harpy. Both of these are both in my display right now. Absolutely love them. Super easy customs to do, but adds a totally cool new type of character to your display. So I did see someone says, what's the sword on the Blue Jay custom? It's actually from a Palisades Muppets, Kermit the Frog as Captain Smollett from Muppets Treasure Island. Seriously, when I tell you that I use fodder from everywhere, trust me, I use fodder from everywhere. It is a Muppets Kermit sword. So someone asked a few minutes ago, actually Diego saying the parrot pirate is amazing. Yeah, you know what? He's not one that I brought out to show. Let me grab him because he is actually one of my favorites as well. And he's worth grabbing because he's also a really easy custom to do. So I did a whole wave of pirate figures, pirate captain type figures, and one of them was this parrot. So I had actually skipped the parrot when it first came out because I'm not a huge fan of the comical type birds. I have Minotaur the Duck because Minotaur the Duck is awesome, but I didn't get the flamingo. I don't have the pelican. A lot of those birds, again, limited space. So those are all ones I got rid of. So I had skipped the parrot at first, but when I got the idea to do a parrot pirate, I just loved it. I thought it was a really fun idea. And he actually uses this coat is from a Pirates of the Caribbean Captain Teague figure from NECA. The red colors work so wonderfully with the parrot. That is where the hat is from as well, and all the weapons. So this is literally just the Scarletros parrot figure with a bunch of accessories from a Captain Teague figure from NECA, and you get to create this cool parrot pirate. Very, very cool. Captain Crackers, I think I call him. Thank you very much, Diego. Greg saying, do the Four Horsemen still have the Etheron mold? Yep, all the bird molds still exist. Again, this is more modern Four Horsemen. Those have not been destroyed. They do have those. To the fact that actually Eagleus, the second version of Eagleus, the super ultra patriotic one, that one was just kind of, reissued again at Big Bad Toy Store. I think they've sold out recently. They don't have that pre-ordering yet, but yeah, they absolutely could remake Etheron down the road. So let's see a couple more comments as we wrap up the night. Yeah, Patrick saying, I forgot about your pirates. Thank you, everybody. Patrick, that parrot is amazing. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So with that, we're a little bit past 9 o'clock. Does anyone have any other questions for me that I can answer? Let's see. I don't know if I can really do this very well, but since you all asked, okay. So I don't know how I'm going to show this. Actually, you know what? I'll just move the camera. So you want to see the tattoo? There's the tattoo. So that way, I always get confused which way to look at. Okay, so you can't really see. Oh, this is so see. This is why I didn't want to do this. This is why I didn't want to do this because it's so hard to show it on a camera like this. So there we go. This Quetzalcoatl goes all the way around my leg. And there you go. That's the Quetzalcoatl's head right there. There you go. Okay. Everyone asked for it. There it is. And it goes all the way around my leg. Down my ankle. But that is the Quetzalcoatl's head. So there you go. You asked. I did my best to show it. Tell you what, if you see me at one of the toy shows, if you come to, if we do Legions Con this year live, when we get to do the intern for a day, I may actually be ToyCon New Jersey. They're doing a May show. Hopefully everything will be okay. And we can actually do that. Hopefully I'll be there. If you see me at any of those shows and you ask me to see it, I will happily show you the tattoo. With that, I think we're about at the end of our evening. So hopefully everyone enjoyed tonight's little history lesson. or like I said, my Horstery lesson. I think that it's always fun and helpful to know where these things come from, to look back at the past as we think about the future, and what an absolutely awesome future we have. AllStars 4 voting, 2 more days on that. Before you know it, that's going to be up. And before you know it, we're going to find out who the winners and what's going on with AllStars 4. But until then, I will be back here next week, as we always say, right? Same Mythic time, same Mythic channel. I will be back here next week for Mythic Conversations. Thank you all for joining. I can't wait, right? I can't wait for that conversation.